I got it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So can you start from the top so we can see like where you would expect to go to find things and like what problem we're trying to solve just for the people who might watch this in the future?
So what we were originally trying to do is simply locate the plan iteration report page. So started out knowing that iterations at the group level, started out by going to groups, and we want to specifically look for that at GitLab org. Went to this view, did a search for plan, and then spotted this, but knowing that's a project, figured we wouldn't be able to find it there because iterations live at the group level, and it didn't appear that we had a group for plan. We only had the project for plan. So we didn't go further at that point, assuming that we wouldn't be able to see iterations if we clicked on plan, since that's a project.
So, and I'll add the color context. The reason why we created plan as a project and not a group is because we needed to have issues that we could collaborate on for internal things. Mm-hmm. And you can't have issues at the group level. So like, it's a conundrum of how you solve this problem of like, hey, anyway, we'll talk to some solutions in a second, but then you should go through and see like, if we want to see the issues that the plan team is working on to ship, if you click in the issues list.
Okay.
None of these issues are development issues. They're all internal process related things like planning issues and that sort of stuff. So you can go from here and now I'll let you go back and keep looking.
Well, that was all the looking that we did to try and find the iterations page, because again, we knew that we wouldn't be able to find plan at this level. And so iterations live at the group level, but issues live at the project level. So how do you reconcile being able to find iterations? Did I just lose my internet? Okay. Now, how do you reconcile being able to find iterations when you only have a project and not a group? But to your point, the issues live at the project level and we needed to see the issues, but those issues roll up to the group, correct?
Yeah.
Like if I go to, well, if we had a group created for a plan and I went to issues from there, I would see the issues related to plan, the project, as long as that project is associated with that group, I would think.
You'd see issues from the project below it that would roll up to that group. But the purpose of, and I think you were exploring iterations because that's the thing that we chose to dog food for the OKR, for dog fooding plan. But herein lies the interesting thing. Let's just assume we did create a plan group and we created an iteration there. Would that give us the information of whether or not, like, would that be the iteration report view that we were looking for or not?
I guess it depends on what you're trying to see in terms of iterations. For what we were trying to see, we just wanted to see what the iteration page contained for plan. So what initially triggered the conversation was in the UX showcase this morning, wasn't Dimitri, I forget who actually presented, but someone presented something that outlined kind of a roadmap for next steps for a project they had worked on recently. And we were talking about, we ideally want to have that outline for these larger projects like iterations of boards. We've got MVC, and then what does the next iteration look like, and the next iteration, and go ahead and get those defined. So we wanted to take a look at that for a plan. And that was kind of where the whole conversation came about. So in terms of seeing that specifically, it's a good question, because I would want to specifically see iterations related to iterations in boards. But when you consider the group level, it's going to show everything related to the group and not just that piece of the pie.
Yep. And also the way that, for example, in the use case you're talking about, like here's the MVC and here's the next iteration,
Mm-hmm.
you can look at that two ways. Like the way that we're building iterations in the product is a time box. It is literally
Mm-hmm.
like a fixed period of weeks, 1 or 2 weeks. You
Mm-hmm.
could also look at the way that that's been broken out as like what's the next chunk of business value is a sub epic, right? That has
Mm-hmm.
here's the features we want to build that may or may not all get completed within a given like time period.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where like we should drive towards more clarity between like what a scope, uh, like how you use epics to manage scope, and then how you use time boxes to tell you what scope you can get done in a given time period.
Mm-hmm.
But that aside, this is the inherent problem with all of GitLab and Plan, and why our customers can't use it right here.
Can you define that in like a sentence?
Sure. We don't, there's no way, even if we had a plan group
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in here and we create our iterations, to ever see the issues that we work on to build our product, because they live in a different project.
Mm-hmm.
And they live in the GitLab, the actual GitLab project within GitLab.org. Right. So, and a project can only have one parent. So like
Mm-hmm.
it can only ever have GitLab.org as the group parent, or some other subgroup as its parent. So if you wanted to see just the things that Plan was working on across, you know, the GitLab.org group, all of it, or just like the stuff that we would schedule for iterations, which would be in like the GitLab.org project
Mm-hmm.
or the GitLab project, the only way, like how would you do that? I guess is therein lies the question.
So are you saying that if I have issues within a project and that project is in a subgroup of GitLab org called plan, for example, when I go to iterations for a plan group, what would I see? Are you saying that I would not see anything in the plan project because it's in a subgroup and there's like a
You
middle
would
layer
see,
there?
yeah, no, you would see things in the plan project if it was directly underneath the plan group,
Mm-hmm.
but the plan team itself does not manage its issues in the plan project, because we're part of an open core community where all of our issue management for our product happens in a separate project, so that it's easy for the community to participate without having to like hunt through all of our different org level groups to find the right thing that they need to look at to leave a comment or whatever.
Right. I feel like I've seen some other problems related to that. Is that kind of like when you go to search for an assignee and it pulls up everyone in the entire
Sort
GitLab?
of, yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
I guess not really.
So like let's go with this. The problem to solve is if we create a plan group, and given our current structure without like moving everything away, and we want to create plan iterations to track plan work. There, how do we see and get issues that are in a sibling project or group? For example, the GitLab project that is not part of the same hierarchy. How do you get
Mm-hmm.
issues from there that we know that are ours into our groups so that we can see them and track them against our iteration?
It makes my head swim a little bit to try and put all the pieces together. I mean, the first thing I would expect is that I would need some way to just say, I want to see the issues in this group manually in
Okay.
the UI.
Okay. From within the plan group. Is that right?
From that top level plan group, yes.
Okay. So you can do that right now if you go into the issue list in the top level group that you're in right now. You can see all of the issues that all of the children have that all roll up here, and you can filter by our team, which is group :
Well, but that's
project management.
filtering. That's not seeing it in the iteration view. That's just showing everything in this view, correct?
Yeah. But like how if you only had permission to the plan group because
Mm-hmm.
least permissions and you weren't allowed to be at this group level to search here,
Mm-hmm.
how would you see the things that you need to work on for your team?
So if I'm only in the plan group and I'm on this view and I'm trying to see the work related to plan,
Yeah. So like in this view, you're at the top level group, so you can see everything. But in
right?
a lot of organizations, they don't give access to everyone at the top level group, or they don't
Right.
want to. They want to give just you access to plan, so you can see just the plan things.
Right.
But in this case, the plan things are defined by a label in another project.
So I think that actually one of the one of the things that Mike and I looked at that may tie into this was he pulled up the plan UX group. I think it was a group. Yeah. And I think he was saying we could create an iteration here, but then that would exclude the developers, I would think, or anyone else who wanted to see that information. Is that correct? Is that kind of the problem that you're referring to, is that because they're not necessarily in this plan UX group, they would not be able to see the iteration issues?
Among other things. But let's look at also what happened there is you switched over to GitLab.com top level group.
Yeah,
So
right,
you're no longer in the .org group.
right.
So let's say that, and this is another good example, if you wanted to have your iterations here, how are you ever going to see issues that are in the GitLab.org GitLab project
You
here so that
can't
you can
right
put
now.
them? No.
Right.
And if you were to create all of your issues here for development,
Mm-hmm.
how would anyone else who's part of the wider community or whatever see those issues that are basically being built against the GitLab.org GitLab code base within
Mm-hmm.
that code base or within that project?
I mean, I don't see that there's a way to do that currently, it
There's
sounds
not.
like.
Nope.
So what is your proposal?
Oh, I don't know yet. I'm still working through it, but I'll share. If you want to let me share my screen, I'll run you through some of the things that we were working on, and it's timely because I was just responding to a comment about some of this stuff. But like in this example, like how do you see an iteration report within your project? You're like, if I'm in the plan project and iterations at the group level, how do I see that, right? And so one way, and this is Kong and Mario working on this now, but you have your group, you create your iteration report at that group level. So in our case, we recreated our iterations at the GitLab.org level,
Mm-hmm.
and we would want to eventually be able to expose those within each subgroup and within each project, so that if
Mm-hmm.
I only have access to this project, I only see the issues associated with this iteration that was created up here within my project view in the iteration list. So I can't create iterations of the project, but I at least could view the report, scope to just the things within the project.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the ways to do it, and it's how we could work within our current structure. But sort of like what I'm working towards in the simplify working group. Let me see if I can pull that up. And this solution validation issue, this is kind of the same. The whole core of the problem is that considering we have 3 top level groups, there are issues I'm assigned to in subgroups, subprojects in each of those top level groups. My manager wants to see my workload in a board of those colleagues, of course. So if you solve this problem, you also can solve, it would solve the same problem. Like, I want to see all the things that my team is working on in the iterations, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so what we're kind of proposing is merging projects and groups into one thing, calling it whatever, but then making it so that they can be shared into one another. And if you share into one another, then the issues will show up in both places. So like if space 4 gets shared into space D, all of the issues from space 4 will be visible within space D's issue list, and could be assigned to, space D's iterations or whatever. This gets kind of complicated for a lot of reasons, but like without blowing up GitLab, like there's not a ton of options.
Right.
one of the other things that we were looking at with the whole, that's why the whole group by thing was there. So if we wanted to group issues by label, for example, in the iteration report, you would go to the GitLab.org iteration list. You would pick the current iteration, and then we could group them by label. Like, let's say we want to say group project management or group, all the group : labels. I want to see a breakdown of that. And you could see a
Right.
breakdown of progress view across those labels within a given iteration, which would also change the burn down chart. So that way, like, you could still get the answers you want of like, where's plans iteration report within the context of the broader group's iteration report. So that's why I was pushing towards this type of solution of the group by within iteration reports, because then it would let you basically right now, the only way to do it is if you go to .org, which is where you have them set up. You go to iteration list here, and then you can see this is where iterations would live, that all the projects can be assigned to.
This
So
is
we
where
have,
we both ended up initially, was in this kind of sort of random GitLab org number 6 iteration. Is this
yep.
like a test environment or what?
No, it's not a test environment. This is the actual iterations that we're dogfitting right now. We're trying to. So this is the one that I created, right, for September 3rd through September 6th. We're running weekly iterations that start on, they start on a Thursday and end on a Wednesday.
And
So
who
that
has
way, like,
access to this?
anyone in the company who I think is a member of the group. So
Anyone
like,
that's a member of GitLab org, I would imagine.
yeah. So we can go ahead and create the next one, GitLab org 7. And then since they start on a Thursday, I think it's confusing. I need to go back and see what date this one was at. So this starts September 3rd through today, September 2nd. Why is this closed already?
Today's the 2nd.
So this got closed automatically at 2:27. Make note of that. We need to talk about how that happened, because it shouldn't close until the end of the day automatically.
How do you know it got closed at 2:27?
I don't, but I know it's 2:27 Eastern right now.
Oh, and
And
it's closed.
well, I guess what is UTC? Is it midnight UTC right now on September 3rd?
Did we talk about that? About what closed means in terms of time zone? Because that's kind of a similar problem that we're encountering with the green bars showing behind those issues in a list view, is what does that time mean to me in the Eastern time zone versus someone who's over in Ireland, for example?
Yeah, we talked about it briefly and we deferred it to a later date, because when we were trying to get the iterations out the door, there was not even a way to manually close them. There's no front end done. There's nothing. They were just perpetually stuck in a list. And
So
yeah.
So I'm guessing that iteration closed at like midnight sometime across the pond.
Probably. The long-term goal is to do sort of like what Pivotal Tracker does, where you, and I think it's I'll just shamelessly copy Pivotal Tracker's configuration view, where you can set the project time zone. So you can basically pick which time zone you want it to be in, so that way it automatically, ends on the right day based on
How
the
does that
time zone
affect
you're.
people though that are spread across time zones? That's just something
You,
that has to be communicated throughout the team.
you just got to pick. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean,
Would
that's
you
why it's iterations are hard, because usually you have a synchronous meeting to kick them off and
right,
a retrospective at the end of it, but you can't do that at GitLab. So that's a challenge we're gonna have to overcome.
right. Interesting. Yeah, teams are no longer in the same room together, same time zone.
Nope.
Would you send me that pivotal tracker page? I
Yeah.
just I'm curious how they've got that set up.
There's all sorts of stuff about time zones, and then the configuration for like this is where we can get into some of those automation things that we talked about. So moving stories from one iteration to the next, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of other settings too. So iteration length, setting how long your things are, project setting stuff. But yeah, I'll send this to you real quick.
I appreciate it. This does remind me again of the conversation that we had at my previous job about giving people the ability to like officially hit a stop button on the iteration versus the company defining when that stop time is. And I think that we landed on giving both as options. They could do one or the other, depending on how they had their iterations configured.
Yeah, so would always advocate for it being automated, but it's
Yeah,
fine if we want to give folks the option to manually do it. The reason why is the whole point of using a time box and iteration is so that you can get the velocity, so that you can help set estimations of what you and commitments of what
right,
you can get done in the future. And if you
right.
have time boxes of varying
You're
duration,
just
then
moving it all over the place.
well, yeah, you increase your volatility because you could get more stuff done in the extra day you
Right,
had or whatever, which breaks the whole point of it. Which is what I
right.
appreciate about pivotal trackers. Because like, screw that. Like, just we're gonna have the same cadence so that you have sane measurements. And anyways, so I'll stop recording.